In the heart of Charleston, South Carolina, stands St. Michael's Church on Monroe Street, where for over a century the bell tower has held a secret that cost a man his life. The church's carillon has played thousands of melodies since 1859, but locals swear that in all those years it has never played the same tune twice. What they don't know is that each unique melody once carried a message that could mean the difference between freedom and death. Before we dive into this haunting tale from Charleston's shadowy past, if you're fascinated by America's hidden histories and the mysteries that lie beneath our most sacred places, make sure to subscribe to Dark Heritage Files and hit that notification bell. We bring you the stories that history books often overlook. And while you're here, let us know in the comments what city and country you're listening from. We love connecting with our global community of mystery enthusiasts. Now, let's uncover the truth behind the chimes that never rang twice. The story I'm about to tell you has been passed down through generations of Charleston residents, preserved in fragmented church records and whispered among families whose ancestors witnessed these events firsthand. Charleston in 1859 was a city walking a tightrope between tradition and transformation. The port city thrived on rice and cotton, its cobblestone streets echoing with the sounds of commerce and the constant presence of both enslaved and free black residents who made up nearly half the population. Spanish moss draped the live oaks like funeral shrouds, and the humid air carried the scent of jasmine mixed with the salty breeze from the harbor. St. Michael's Church dominated the skyline on Monroe Street, its white steeple reaching toward heaven like a marble finger. Built in 1761, the church had become a cornerstone of Charleston's religious and social life. Its bell tower housed a magnificent carillon installed in 1848, a gift from a wealthy parishioner who had imported the mechanism from Belgium. The intricate system of bells could play complex melodies that drifted across the city at dawn, noon, and evening, calling the faithful to worship and marking the passage of time. The church's congregation included some of Charleston's most prominent families, plantation owners and merchants who filled the pristine white pews each Sunday. But what made St. Michael's unique was its bell ringer, Moses Washington, a freed slave who had been granted his liberty in 1852 by his former owner's will. Moses was a quiet man in his 40s, with gentle eyes and calloused hands that moved across the carillon's keyboard with the precision of a master craftsman. Moses had learned to read music from a traveling minister and possessed an almost supernatural understanding of the carillon's mechanisms. He lived in a small room above the church's vestry, dedicating his life to maintaining the bells and ensuring their music blessed the city 3 times daily. The congregation had grown accustomed to his presence, appreciating his dedication while remaining largely indifferent to the man himself. What no one suspected was that Moses had been secretly modifying the carillon's programming mechanism, creating a system so sophisticated that it would continue to function long after his death. Each melody he programmed carried coded information that would have shocked the very foundations of Charleston society. The morning of October 15, 1859, dawned gray and oppressive, with storm clouds gathering over Charleston Harbor. Moses had risen before dawn, as was his custom, to prepare the carillon for the morning service. Reverend Thomas Whitmore arrived at the church around 7 o'clock to find the vestry door slightly ajar, which was unusual given Moses's meticulous habits. Calling out Moses's name and receiving no response, Reverend Whitmore climbed the narrow stairs to the bell tower. What he discovered would haunt him for the rest of his days. Moses lay crumpled at the base of the carillon, his body positioned as if he had fallen from the mechanism's upper levels. Blood pooled beneath his head, and his right hand clutched a small brass gear that had been torn from the carillon's internal workings. The church bells had been silent that morning, their absence creating an eerie void in the city's soundscape. Dr. Edmund Hartwell, the church's physician and a member of the congregation, was summoned immediately. After examining the body, he pronounced that Moses had died from a severe head injury, likely sustained in a fall while working on the carillon's upper mechanisms. However, several details troubled those who knew Moses well. The man had climbed those same stairs and worked on that mechanism for 7 years without incident. His movements around the carillon were as sure as a spider on its web. Moreover, the brass gear in his hand appeared to have been forcibly removed, its edges twisted and sharp as if torn away in a struggle. The church's custodian, an elderly white man named Samuel Porter, mentioned seeing unfamiliar men near the church the previous evening. He described them as well-dressed, but with the bearing of men accustomed to violence. When pressed for details, Porter became evasive, claiming his old eyes might have been deceiving him in the twilight. The official cause of death was recorded as accidental, and Moses was buried in the colored section of Magnolia Cemetery 3 days later. Only a handful of people attended the funeral, mostly other freed slaves and a few sympathetic church members. Reverend Whitmore delivered a brief eulogy, praising Moses's dedication to his work and his gentle spirit. In the weeks following Moses's death, St. Michael's struggled to find a replacement bell ringer. The carillon was a complex instrument requiring not only musical knowledge, but also technical expertise to maintain its intricate mechanisms. 3 different men attempted to master the system, but none could coax the same beautiful melodies from the bells that Moses had produced. It was during this time that the congregation began to notice something peculiar. The carillon seemed to be playing on its own, producing melodies at odd hours when no one was in the tower. More disturbing still, each melody was unique, never repeating any sequence of notes. The music was hauntingly beautiful but somehow unsettling, as if the bells were trying to communicate something beyond mere worship. Mrs. Adelaide Pemberton, the church organist and one of the few people who had shown genuine kindness to Moses, began keeping a journal of the mysterious melodies. She possessed perfect pitch and could transcribe the music as she heard it. What she discovered alarmed her deeply. The melodies followed mathematical patterns that seemed deliberately constructed, with specific intervals and rhythms that suggested a coded system. Reverend Whitmore, meanwhile, had been receiving visits from city officials and prominent citizens expressing concern about the church's irregular bell schedule. Mr. Cornelius Ashford, a wealthy cotton merchant and church benefactor, suggested that the carillon be silenced until a proper replacement could be found. His insistence struck the Reverend as oddly urgent, particularly given that the music, while unusual, was still beautiful. The mystery deepened when Mrs. Pemberton discovered that Moses had been keeping detailed records of his work hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the bell tower. The papers contained musical notations, sketches of the carillon's mechanisms, and what appeared to be a complex coding system. Most intriguingly, she found correspondence with individuals in Philadelphia, New York, and other northern cities, written in a careful hand that discussed shipments and safe harbors in language that seemed to refer to something other than commerce. As autumn progressed into winter, the automatic melodies continued, each one unique and precisely timed. The church's attendance began to decline as rumors spread about the haunted carillon. Some claimed to have seen Moses's ghost in the tower, while others whispered about divine judgment for some unnamed sin. The truth began to emerge when Heinrich Zimmermann arrived in Charleston in January 1860. Zimmermann was a German immigrant and master clockmaker who had established a reputation in Savannah for his expertise with complex mechanical instruments. Reverend Whitmore had written to him describing the carillon's unusual behavior, hoping that a skilled craftsman might be able to restore normal operation. Zimmermann was a methodical man with piercing blue eyes and a talent for understanding mechanical systems that bordered on the supernatural. He had fled Germany in 1848 following the failed revolutionary movements, carrying with him both technical expertise and strong abolitionist sympathies that he kept carefully hidden in the slave-owning South. His initial examination of the carillon revealed that Moses had been a mechanical genius. The dead man had modified the instrument's programming cylinder, creating a system that could store and replay hundreds of unique melodies. More remarkably, he had constructed a timing mechanism that could trigger different melodies based on specific dates and times, creating the illusion of supernatural activity. But as Zimmerman delved deeper into the mechanism, he began to understand that the musical patterns were not random. The melodies contained encoded information, using a system that combined musical intervals with timing sequences to create a sophisticated communication network. Each unique melody carried specific data about routes, safe houses, and dangers along what he began to suspect was the Underground Railroad. The realization struck Zimmerman like a physical blow. Moses had been operating a crucial communication hub for escaped slaves, using the church's bell tower to broadcast coded messages across the city and beyond. The carillon's reach extended for miles, and its regular schedule meant that the coded melodies could be heard and recorded by sympathetic listeners throughout Charleston. Working late into the night, Zimmerman began to decode the messages that Moses had programmed into the system. The sophistication was breathtaking. Different musical keys indicated different types of information: routes to safe houses, warnings about increased patrols, signals for when ships would be available to carry fugitives north. The timing of the melodies corresponded to specific dates when assistance would be available or when danger was imminent. As Zimmerman's investigation progressed, he became aware that his presence in Charleston was being monitored. The same well-dressed men that Samuel Porter had described began appearing near the church, watching his comings and goings with undisguised interest. Mr. Ashford visited the church frequently, ostensibly to check on the repair progress, but actually to observe Zimmerman's work. The German clockmaker realized he was walking into the same trap that had claimed Moses's life. Someone had discovered the bell ringer's activities and eliminated him, but they hadn't been able to decipher the carillon's automated system. Now they were hoping that Zimmerman would unlock the secrets for them, after which he would likely meet the same fate as his predecessor. The pressure intensified when Zimmerman discovered that Moses had programmed the carillon to broadcast an emergency signal on February 15, 1860. The melody would alert the Underground Railroad network that the Charleston route had been compromised and that alternate plans should be activated. The message would save lives, but it would also expose the full extent of the operation to anyone who understood the code. Zimmerman faced an impossible choice. He could dismantle the system, saving his own life but betraying Moses's legacy and endangering countless fugitive slaves. Or he could allow the message to be broadcast, knowing that it would likely result in his death and the destruction of the entire network. The decision became more urgent when Mrs. Pemberton approached him with alarming news. She had been observing the men who watched the church and had recognized one of them as Marcus Crenshaw, a notorious slave catcher who worked for plantation owners throughout the region. Crenshaw's presence suggested that powerful interests were involved in the surveillance and that the stakes extended far beyond Charleston. Just when we think we understand the magnitude of Moses's operation, the horror in Charleston intensifies. If this story is giving you chills, share this video with a friend who loves dark historical mysteries. Give it a like to support our content, and don't forget to subscribe to Dark Heritage Files so you don't miss more stories like this. Let's find out together how Heinrich Zimmerman faced this deadly dilemma. On the night of February 14, 1860, Heinrich Zimmerman made his decision. He would allow Moses's final message to be broadcast, but he would also ensure that the carillon's secrets died with him. Working through the night, he carefully documented the coding system and prepared copies of the information to be sent to abolitionist contacts in the North. As dawn approached on February 15th, Zimmerman positioned himself in the bell tower, knowing that Crenshaw and his associates would be waiting for the emergency signal. The carillon began its automated sequence at precisely 6:00 a.m., broadcasting the coded warning across Charleston. The melody was more complex than any previous transmission, containing detailed information about compromised routes and alternate escape paths. The response was immediate. Within minutes, armed men surrounded the church, led by Crenshaw and several prominent Charleston citizens who had been secretly funding the slave-catching operation. They found Zimmerman calmly dismantling the carry-on's mechanism, destroying the evidence of Moses's genius, even as the final notes echoed across the city. The confrontation that followed revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Moses had been murdered not by random violence, but by a coordinated effort involving some of Charleston's most respected citizens. They had discovered his activities through a betrayal within the Underground Railroad network, but had been unable to decipher his coding system. Moses had died protecting the secret that would have exposed hundreds of abolitionists and their escape routes. Zimmerman's fate was sealed the moment he chose to honor Moses's legacy. But his sacrifice ensured that the emergency warning reached its intended recipients, allowing the Underground Railroad to adapt and continue its operations through alternate routes. The carillon fell silent forever, its mechanisms destroyed beyond repair, taking with it the evidence of one of the most sophisticated communication networks in the history of the abolitionist movement. The official records state that Heinrich Zimmermann died in an accident while repairing the church's carillon, killed when the heavy mechanism collapsed during maintenance work. The similarity to Moses's death was noted but not investigated, and the carillon was declared beyond repair due to the extensive damage. St. Michael's Church installed a simple bell system that rang at traditional intervals, ending the era of unique melodies that had characterized the building for months. The congregation gradually returned to normal attendance, relieved to have the mysterious music silenced. The incident became a cautionary tale about the dangers of complex mechanical systems and the importance of proper maintenance. But the truth had deeper consequences. The coded messages that Moses had programmed into the carillon had helped coordinate the escape of over 300 enslaved people during the system's brief operational period. The emergency broadcast on February 15th warned network operators across the southeast that their communications had been compromised, allowing them to establish new routes and methods before the approaching civil war would render such secrecy unnecessary. Mrs. Adelaide Pemberton, the church organist who had documented Moses's melodies, quietly left Charleston in March 1860, taking her transcriptions with her. She settled in Philadelphia, where she worked with Quaker abolitionists to help establish safe houses for refugees from the South. Her musical records provided crucial intelligence about the scope and sophistication of resistance operations in the slave states. The men who had orchestrated the murders of Moses and Zimmermann found their victory hollow. Without the carillon's coded messages to intercept, they lost their ability to monitor and disrupt escape routes. The Underground Railroad adapted quickly, developing new communication methods that proved even more difficult to detect. By the time the Civil War began a year later, the network had evolved beyond their ability to control. This mystery reveals the extraordinary courage of individuals who risked everything to fight injustice, using their skills and knowledge to create hope where none existed. Moses Washington and Heinrich Zimmermann paid the ultimate price for their principles, but their sacrifice ensured that the music of freedom continued to play even when the bells themselves fell silent. What do you think about this story of coded melodies and hidden heroism? Do you believe such sophisticated resistance networks existed in the antebellum South? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dark chapter from American history and want more untold stories like this, subscribe to Dark Heritage Files, activate the notification bell, and share this video with someone who appreciates the hidden heroes of our past. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most powerful messages are hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to listen.